The following takes place between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. Events occur in real time.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of FPC Radio Live in the brand new year 2022. It is January the 3rd. It is Monday. That means we are going to be recapping much of what we saw yesterday. And we saw quite a bit, John. And there was some upsets, there was some drama, and of course, there was in my opinion, an MVP clinching performance by one Mr. Tom Brady last night. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
I don't think either one clinched the MVP. I thought they both played really well. I mean, different types of games, obviously. The Jets were in total control of that game over Tampa Bay, and Brady does what he always does, like leads them to victory from behind. Just another amazing performance. And I thought Rodgers was very efficient, outstanding in that win over Minnesota. So I think it's going to come down to those two. And then the third candidate I throw in there is your younger brother, Joe Burrow, who's just lighting it up right now in Cincinnati and doing a fantastic job. And just talk about a guy who changed the culture in an organization. From the moment he was drafted there, when people were like, well, why don't you demand a trade? He goes, no, I'm going to go to Cincinnati and we're going to win. That's the attitude, right? Like he didn't, bow out of going to one of the worst franchises in all of football. But I think those three guys will finish 1, 2, 3. I think it's going to be Rodgers, Brady, Burrow. You think it's going to, you're pushing for Brady, Rodgers, Burrow. It's going to come down to those three. Forget Jonathan Taylor. Forget Cooper Kupp. I mean, if you're going to put Cooper Kupp in the discussion, throw Devontae Adams in the discussion. He's every bit as good. So, yeah, it's going to come down to three quarterbacks. Look, it was quite a fun Sunday because I just want to make sure, Ian, if Brady doesn't win the MVP, you're not going to take your shirt off, are you, and throw it into the sand?
No.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
And I do want to say, two things. First off, yes, my opinion is that it's Brady, Rodgers, and everyone else. And I feel very strongly in that one. And I think, the problem, the perception out there is that Brady is the one that has been trying to catch Rodgers. And the reality of it is it's the opposite. And that's why I think yesterday was an absolute lock it up, put away the key. Tom Brady won the MVP. Coming from behind against the team. And I don't want to hear it was just the Jets because, first of all, Packers fans, this is to you. If you want to talk about strength of schedule, you don't want to go down that road. Trust me, it is heavily favored in Tom Brady's favor. So just I would not even try to bark up that tree. Let's just put it that way. So I don't want to hear about it. It was just the Jets. The Jets beat the Titans at one point this season, which I still don't know how that happened. But for what it's worth, they came out and they were playing well. Give Zach Wilson some credit. He looked pretty good there at the beginning of the game. And I'm sitting here thinking oh my God, this Bucs team is going to lose to the Jets because they can't stop them. And have you ever seen two post whistle after the play offensive line unsportsmanlike conduct penalties in a single game? I feel like that doesn't happen that often. And we saw two within 5 plays of each other from the Buccaneers. And I'm sitting here thinking,
Ryan Jensen. Yeah, I think obviously he has a reputation at this point. So
easily, yeah, they're going to throw the flag no matter what.
They're going to throw the flag at him because he's obviously a hothead, and he's done this every year he's been in the NFL. I mean, we'll see him oftentimes, 10 yards downfield engaging with someone, and they just want to take that out of the equation. But give the Jets credit. They not only beat Tennessee earlier in the year, they beat Cincinnati. Right, when Cincinnati was riding very high, and now Cincinnati's the AFC North champ. So no, I give the Jets a lot of credit. I think the coach is building something there, and I was high on Zach Wilson because I love guys with extreme arm talent. I don't have any idea why the Jets. I mean, I can see why they went for it on fourth and goal from the 7, but a quarterback sneak.
Yeah, that was an odd play. Yeah.
Fourth and two with a 6'1" quarterback. Now, if it's 4th and about 2 with Brady, quarterback sneaks fine. He's 6'5". He's the best to ever do that particular thing as well. But going for it, you get the first down, game's over. You take 3 knees and you pull off the upset. But no, I mean, both of our quarterbacks played a very high level. I think that the one thing that may end up separating this, Ian, and I talked about it for the last several weeks, is now Green Bay's clinched the number 1 seed. And the last 8 NFL MVPs have all been quarterbacks, and they've all drawn buys, right? You can go from 2013 with Peyton Manning all the way to last year with Aaron Rodgers. All 8 of those quarterbacks, and Rodgers has won it twice, so 7 quarterbacks, they all were coming, they earned a bye. And obviously the last few years, only one team gets a bye. So that may weigh into voters as a tiebreaker and say, well, one guy just had a better record, so let's give it to him. It could be that.
Which is ironic because, as we know, when it comes to Tom Brady, wins don't count. But everyone other than Tom, it does obviously count. And look, there's certainly credibility to that argument. And I I think had the Bucs lost yesterday, the 2-win difference would be hard to explain, and given the fact that at the end of the day, I mean, they could theoretically finish with the same exact record. Now the Packers have the same, will have the bye regardless. That's not going to change. So I'm not necessarily putting too much stock or too much weight into that. Not that it's not impressive, because again, to me, that in addition to, and like I said before we got on the air, a now 0.8 point QBR lead. And depending on, like I said to everyone who depends on which EPA number you use, well, one EPA has them relatively close, and Rodgers 1, Brady 3 or 4. The other one has Brady comfortably ahead in 1 and 2 in both EPA and pass EPA. So again, which one are you going to use? Well, probably the one that suits your argument better. So to me, that's not an advantage for Rodgers. If anything, it's a wash between the two. So you're talking about a 0.8 QBR lead, an additional win, ignoring of the fact that he missed the game. And I'm not saying you, John. I don't want you to think I'm directing this at you. I'm directing this at the general public. So I'm just talking about the things that Rodgers, quote unquote, is leading the MVP race in. So the additional win, the very marginal lead in QBR, a lead in passer rating, and the turnovers, the raw interceptions that, again, is just apparently enough to outweigh, John, 5 additional touchdowns, 1,000 additional passing yards, and to overcome going into last week, I don't know what the totals were today because they haven't updated the numbers, but an 18 drop differential, which weighs very heavily in those QBR and passer rating numbers. So the case for Rodgers, in my opinion, is so very thin and surface. It's incredible. It's astonishing to me that he has become the media and not necessarily the voters, because I think there's a very distinct difference between, the Good Morning Football crowd up there that's up there to, create a discussion every morning, as opposed to actual voters who actually consider and look into a lot of these things. Tom Brady's the hands down leader in all these categories. I mean, to me, it's so hard to explain that, Aaron Rodgers, who, look, the Packers offense, they might have snuck into the top 10 this week. They might have. Brady's had this Bucs offense at 1 or 2 the entire season. Not to mention, again, the defense, both defenses are roughly the same. They've given up just about the same number of points. I think the Bucs have given up 2 more points. So essentially, at the end of the day, that's kind of moot. I mean, no team necessarily has an advantage. But again, what do you want to say about their competition? Well, coming into the week, and I brought this up last week, Tom Brady and the Bucs had faced the toughest strength of schedule for defenses, specifically pass defenses as well. Aaron Rodgers, 19th. When we're talking about a race that is so close, my perception, I don't think it's that close, to be honest with you. I think it's close, but I don't think
close.
Well,
it's
relative.
It's really close. I think in the end it's going to be close.
No, I think it's close. I think it's close, but I mean, people have it to the point where it's so close that somehow, you know what I mean? Like I'm basing this off the narrative out there, not necessarily the reality. I think it's close, but I think people think it's a little too close. If that makes sense. You know what? I'm just going to start rambling if I don't move off that here in a second. I don't want to lose track.
Take your shirt off.
Yeah,
no. Throw it into the
trust me, you don't want that. Let me hit the beach a few times at least before I do that. Give myself a nice little
Man,
glow
is
here,
Antonio Brown in great shape or what? I mean, could I just have that body for one day? I mean, because I was actually watching that game. The Patriots game was ridiculous. I mean, it was like,
Well, I
Jacksonville could just
had
mail
both
it in.
on, but
I just was tuned
well,
into the
before I get to Antonio, I just want to wrap this up before I get to Antonio Brown
Go ahead.
because I have a few thoughts on that. But look, the bottom line is you're talking about having to first of all explain how those marginal advantages for Aaron Rodgers somehow usurp. I love that word. Usurp the 40 touchdowns, the over one. I mean, the fact that he has over 1,000 more passing yards is absurd. That's kind of a ridiculously wide margin. And here's a good one. Yesterday, John, Tom Brady threw 50 touchdown passes, and we've talked about this before. One of my
50
favorite
passes, not 50 touchdown passes.
yeah,
That would have been impressive.
sorry. Yeah, that would have been pretty impressive.
Ian,
Sorry. I don't like to exaggerate things like a lot of pro Packers fans do.
He's not Will Chamberlain.
Yeah,
if Chamberlain played quarterback, he would have thrown 50 touchdown passes in the game.
Oh man, no. 50 pass attempts. And this is something we've talked about a lot off the air and on the air, and it's one of my favorite all-time Brady stats because it really puts into perspective how great he has been. That victory yesterday was his 22nd. No other quarterback in the history of football has more than 5. And on top of that, John, and this is what's crazy. That was his 3rd one this season. 3 times this season, they have won a game where Tom Brady has had thrown the ball 50 or more times. And again, that's almost matching a career total for the next best quarterback in the history of the NFL. So,
which I believe is Rodgers, right? Rodgers is second in that?
No, he's not.
I think he has 5 of those games.
I might actually have to technically Joe Montana, I think, is second, and I think there's a couple others because it's broken down by win percentage. Because Rodgers is like 5-19, which that's like a 300 win percentage. Brady is 22 and like 10, which again, you're talking about absurd, like upside down, complete opposite of the actual trend. So to me, again, I'm looking at that and I'm saying, you want to talk about things that are being done that have never been done before. Look, I do think age can factor into this. I mean, when you look at all this and then you sit there and say, Tom Brady's doing this at 44. They're doing it with LeBron. And we talked about this before. It's kind of funny. The pro LeBron people are also the anti-Brady people, but they should be the same people. You know what I mean? Because the same people.
Because I am. Well, see, here's the thing. This isn't good for talk radio, Ian, but I'm pro Brady, pro Rodgers. I think they've just.
I like both. I love both quarterbacks, but at the end of the day,
but to me, I can't come out here and say, well, look, LeBron at 37 is playing better than anybody in the NBA. Isn't this ridiculous? And not say what Tom Brady's doing at 44 isn't ridiculous. Absolutely, you can be a fool, but there are fools out there, right? And it's
Well, and
I think if you like LeBron, you should like Brady.
Like I understand. Like we've talked about. Like I understand why, because there's obviously LeBron's early part of his career. He was a prime rival for the Boston Celtics, and there's a lot of crossover for Brady fans and obviously Celtics fans.
Yeah.
So that's natural. I understand that, but mostly the talking heads, because the same people will sit there and just scoff at the idea that Tom's doing this at 44. Will sit there all weekend and say LeBron is 37. I mean, we saw it all week, and that's fine. I mean, you look, like when athletes do these things at an advance, that's impressive. I mean, that's part of it. That's part of their greatness. So I'm not bemoaning that. I'm just kind of pointing out the hypocrisy by a lot of these national people because, I'm sitting here scratching my head saying like, okay, again, Brady leads in touchdowns. He has a massive lead in yards. That 3-1, that's what he is this season when throwing 50 times a game. He's 3-1. I mean, the fact that those 3 wins almost match the second highest total, that's absurd, and that should be looked at as like, okay, the Bucs are clearly putting far more on his shoulders and on his arm than any team in this league, and they are succeeding. 25th in the league in rushing yards, and you watched that game yesterday. Do the Bucs have a rushing attack at all?
No, they just pretty much give up on it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Keyshawn Vaughn tripped over his own feet twice after receiving handoffs, and I'm just sitting here thinking like, they literally have to put the ball in Tom Brady's hand every single time. Like people using his pass attempts as something as a negative against him. I'm sitting here thinking like, what are you talking about? Like, yeah,
Well,
you can use that as a negative if they were losing and they were 7-9, but this team is 12-5, 12-4. Yeah, 12-4. Sorry, the new schedule screwed me up, John.
I
I
know it's
can't do
going to
this
take
math.
forever to
It's
figure this
driving
out.
me
I know. I'm
nuts,
like,
but
I go, Green Bay's gone 13-3 straight years, but they still have another game
yeah,
left.
and I'm like, wait a minute. Come on now. It's going to be nuts. It's going to be like 15 years before we figure that out. And
Go to
might,
18 at this point, right? Go to
yeah, just make
18.
it even.
I,
Come
I
on.
like even. Yeah, give us even numbers. Every other sport has,
Ugh.
162, 82. It's going to go to 8. What I would do is go to 18 and have 2 bye weeks. I mean, the season would never end.
Well,
but,
does that mean now Rodgers
like
get to excuse the first 2 weeks of the season if it suits him?
Yeah.
Because that seems to be what the I mean literally and oh man, see now I was just winding down, John. I was ready to move on.
Damn.
And you made me remember. Oh, real quick too, coming into the week.
Every time I try to get out, they pull me back in.
Well, side note, also 58% of Rodgers' passing yard totals come from yard after catch. Tom Brady, 46%. Little side note, but
that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, hey, it's good. Just saying. But no, Chris Collinsworth up there, basically doing what fans do on Twitter and completely excusing Aaron Rodgers' bad game in week 1. Like, oh, well, it was week 1. It doesn't matter. No, it matters. It matters. You can't pick and choose and say, oh, well, this game doesn't count because of this. Well, what are we doing here? If that's the mentality
they became the number 1 seed. I mean, they still had that disastrous week 1.
No,
horrible, and so
no, that's fine. That's fine. We're talking about his individual play, though.
In 2003, didn't the Patriots get shut out by Buffalo in week 1, 31?
Oh, yeah.
We're
not talking about how good the team is. I'm just saying, like,
right.
The facts are, like, Aaron Rodgers got pulled in that game because he didn't play well. Like, you can't just wipe that from the record.
38-3 at that point. I think they just figured, get this guy out.
Well, they were up 25, and I didn't know if they were going to even take him out yesterday. I was like, oh, geez, here we go again. But to their credit, for the first time all season, he was taken out when they had a lead.
Yeah.
And it didn't lead to just 3 straight kneel downs by the backup quarterback. So give credit where credit's due.
Yeah,
but
love a chance. It was cold out there.
Yeah, and look, if you're going to have the mentality that you can just pick and choose which games you want to count, that's not how this works. That's not how this is done. And that kind of speaks to my, like, Aaron Rodgers is great. You don't have to lie and manipulate facts to try to prove your point. And we're seeing that over and over and over again. Has he been, saddled with some injuries? Absolutely. So haven't the Bucs. I mean, do you remember at one point the Buccaneers literally didn't have a quarterback? They had Richard Sherman shift to safety and a hybrid safety quarterback because they had no one else. So, like, injuries happen. Like, this idea that and how it's being framed is that Aaron Rodgers has overcome this mountain of injuries. It's like, I mean, I see him as a team that is probably suffered about the average amount, because you look at some of these other teams that are dealing with some of these injuries, and you're like, yeah, that's a team that's been.
It's more about the quality of players. I mean, Jair Alexander is one of the very best cornerbacks in football. Darius Smith is an outstanding player. David Bakhtiari, by all accounts, is the best left tackle in football, and Elton Jenkins has missed half. I mean, the quality of players,
which is funny.
And look,
ironic.
Tampa's had the same thing. Here's why I think the national media just loves Rodgers more than Brady. First of all, Brady. I mean, what more can you say? It's almost everything's been said. But I also think, I wonder that going into these games when they have the
I think I just lost you there, John. Hold on a second. Oh, all right. We had a little bit of snafu with John here. It's all right. Give me 1 second. We're going to get him right back into the mix here. Hopefully we can actually get you on here, because you're actually, John, not coming through on our Bluetooth here. So give me just a second. We're going to work through this, but hopefully, and John is leaving us very suspenseful when it comes to what his reasoning was for the national media not being able to, essentially vote for Brady when it's essentially should be his award to lose. So hopefully, once we get John going here, he will give us the reason. John, I think we're going to have you here in just a second. There we go. Listen to it ring. Listen to it go. Welcome back.
Hello.
Welcome back.
All right.
I don't know what happened. You dropped from the connection, and I could only hear you through the phone, and the folks out there couldn't hear you. So
I was making my first good point in like 3 months, and I got dropped. So
that was not intentional. I swear. I
Can I-
swear.
do you think this is part of this? And look, Rogers is a prickly guy, right? We get that. But I think he's smart enough to know that when he's dealing with like the national media, like Chris Collinsworth or Troy Aikman or whoever's doing the game, he must charm the pants off them, right? And they're like kind of intrigued that here's a guy who actually says things where everybody else is kind of cookie cutter, and Tom's much more guarded. Although I think he's opened up more since he's been in Tampa Bay. I just wonder if that when you are doing a game and you get to talk to the quarterback leading up to it, that the quarterback that's kind of giving you a lot and being interesting, you're so happy to have someone like that you just throw bouquets at him. We saw this with John Madden and Brett Favre, right?
Yeah,
he loved
but
Brett Favre.
should
I just think that maybe
influence.
No, of course
voting?
not. But we're all humans. We're all humans, right? Like you now, when you have the Eye Test podcast, right? You get to talk to all these different people that Clark gets up there. Sometimes you probably get off the phone and go, geez, I really didn't like that guy, but you know what? He was a pretty nice guy. So now you become, we're still human beings. And you go, geez, I wanted to not like that guy, but he was really good. He was a good guy to talk to. He was accommodating. He was, we pushed back a little bit and he was good about it. So maybe your disdain isn't the same, or you may like the guy more if you like him, those types of things.
No, that's fair. But I mean, but that's the thing though, that's, when you're that in that role on a national, you're not supposed to play favorites. You know what I mean? You're supposed to be a journalist. You're supposed to be presenting the game, not, well, again, depending on who we're talking about.
Analysts,
analysts, journalists, and columnists are all different, and have different type of roles. But the reality of it is, you should have some professional integrity. So if you're going to be swayed so easily by someone who just basically butters your bread, you know what I mean? That's kind of like, that's like, all right, so what is this? What is it? Basically a campaigning thing? Should we go get some Willards for all the voters? You know what I mean? Some tip calculators and try to sway their vote that way. I heard they're hot, John. I heard they're hot. I'm out the back of the truck. So
I wouldn't know anything about that growing up in Somerville, Massachusetts. I would
no,
not know that
not
at all. I don't
all.
know what you are talking about, Ian. I'm
but yeah,
completely ignorant to that.
Look, I think it's going to be interesting how the narrative shifts and how things go throughout this week. And look, I mean, I'm surprised that for the most part, Rogers has not caught any slack for actually missing a game. That seems to have been, not only is he getting a pass for week 1, but he's also getting a pass for missing that week, that game against the Chiefs, which, look, is it fair? I mean, sure, when you're talking about the MVP race, yeah, you got to be there, and his actions, just like Kirk Cousins, Kirk Cousins should be getting the same sort of slack, because his decision not to get vaccinated basically guaranteed that he was going to miss a game if he got,
right,
no matter what. So yeah, I mean, it's tough to me to sit back and just sit here and just watch people just blatantly ignore things that I think should be very, very important when we have this discussion. But before we close up shop here today, I do want to talk about Antonio Brown, because obviously that was a big story yesterday, him walking off the field and, basically spelling the end of his tenure with the Buccaneers. He's been released and cut. And obviously the circumstances, there's very little information about what happened until this morning, where we got a little bit of an insight. And look, if I didn't think there would be a situation where I necessarily cut him some slack. But what we were told this morning was essentially he felt like he was not healthy enough to go in. And look, he's been dealing with an ankle injury. He's missed a lot of time because of it. He's missed practice all week because of it. And Bruce Arians and the coaching staff essentially said, if you don't go in, you can leave. So do I approve of how he handled himself? Absolutely not. But even then, don't you kind of think like, well, now this kind of makes a little sense. Maybe not a lot, but a little sense. Like if Antonio Brown was truly concerned about the health of his ankle, which this wasn't just a oh, I'm just going to slide my ankle. Or no, he's been dealing with this issue the entire week. There was a report that he had a setback last week during practice, so it's a very legitimate concern. This could be an acceptable explanation for what he did, as opposed to the perception when it first happened, and that was he just walked out and quit on everyone because he didn't get his way. I think there was a report at some point saying or alluding to the fact that the Bucks were trying to hold back because he was reaching incentives or whatever, and the reality of it, that wasn't true. I mean, especially if it comes out that he wasn't trying to go in, which means that the money didn't really mean anything.
Right. Yeah, that makes no
Yeah.
sense. I think it was a $333,000 bonus for another 8 catches and another $333,000 bonus for another 55 yards, which you would think he could get in the next 2 weeks. And we remember last year when he had those bonuses available that Brady was ready, willing, and able to make sure he got it. Because that's what the quarterback does. He wants to take care of his guys. So I think that would have been the case. And look, the owners of the Buccaneers can afford, $2/3 of $1 million. I don't think that's going to be a real problem for them. So yeah, who knows what the situation was? I mean, did he take it literally when if Bruce Arians says get out of here, just get out of my face? Did Antonio Brown take it literally and says, okay, I'll leave? And then because you do remember Brady was kind of over near the bench, right? At one moment talking to Antonio Brown, they showed a shot of it. Antonio Brown kind of looked up beforehand. So I don't know what was said there. I mean, we know Brady gets very heated in these games, and that's what makes him so special. So I don't know. I'm also wondering, does Antonio Brown still live with Brady? That'd be kind of awkward.
No,
I think he moved out on his own.
Yeah. I think that was only a temporary situation.
Okay, because it is a 28,000 square foot house, so he could probably hide and not have to see each other.
Look, and this shouldn't have shocked anyone because after the game, I mean, I honestly sometimes I wish I could be as empathetic, or is that am I using that right? Maybe I think I'm just stumbling on my words, but
empathetic. You show empathy.
Yeah,
you show empathy.
Yeah,
you show concern. Yeah.
I wish I had the level of empathy that Tom Brady has. With all those circumstances up there, I know people are sitting there saying, "Oh, what do you expect him to say?" Well, I didn't expect him to go up and, despite everything, sit there and talk about Antonio Brown, the human. When I should have. I should have, because this is who Tom Brady is. And we sit there and wonder why, when we sit there and say that you could not find a single former teammate who will ever say a bad thing about him. And that's not an exaggeration. This isn't a Rodgers Packers level. We need to inflate the reality to prove our point. No, I challenge you to find one negative thing said by a former teammate of Tom Brady's. And, I'm pretty confident that you won't, based on, once again, what we see from him on camera, and that is just showing empathy towards someone who, at the end of the day, I'm not sitting here excusing him from the mistakes he's made or anything like that, but I think we can all sit here and realize that he's a guy who has some mental issues, and I know that mental health has become a really a focus of everyone, and as it should be, because it's such a important thing to manage. But all too often I see people preaching about bettering mental health and then seeing someone screw up and just say throw the book at him, when clearly his mental health is not to the level. You know what I mean? It seems very hypocritical. And then to say, well, of course Brady's shilling for him. Well, no, I mean, he's actually showing empathy towards someone outside of football. Sometimes we mix football and life, and we can't tell the difference. And we treat players and coaches and people involved as such, as commodities and not necessarily humans. Well, we're all humans. These are all human beings that are dealing with different things. And I'm not trying to excuse any of his actions, but just the level, like I said, the level of empathy, the level of concern. It's just I wish I could be that good. Let's just put it that way. I wish I could show that.
I think Brady is a guy that loves to be surrounded by positivity, right? I think that's part of what he is now. Kind of like the Zen moments where he just he wants to be happy and content and whatever. So I'm sure he tries to give that to his teammate as well. But I mean, this is like transgression number 25 for Antonio Brown. And some of them, I mean, look, you could talk about mental health, and I'm all in support of that. That people that have issues, they have to be taken care of. But stiffing chefs and doing things he did to women, I mean that's bad. Those aren't things that we can really excuse. And then an hour later, doesn't he drop a rap song?
Well,
Like
again, I
on
mean that
Instagram.
doesn't
But
that just scream that he's just not
no,
mentally
he's a
together?
narcissist, which is. But the other thing is, I mean, is this something he did to like pump up the song? Like, let me completely blow up, and everyone's
No,
talking about
I don't
Antonio
think
Brown today.
I don't think
Maybe
he's
I'm
that
giving him
extreme.
more credit.
Well,
Yeah,
but
I mean,
obviously though, he reacts more than he's reactive as opposed to proactive. Like,
oh yeah,
he's clear. He comes into the week obviously not being able to handle some of his emotions, and it leads to actions taken that it's like that text message with the Patriots. Like, again, that's all he had to do was just not do that, and he would have been
right.
probably a member of the Patriots for the rest of 2019, and who knows what would have happened after that. But
Brady might have stayed. Who
yeah,
knows?
I mean, maybe. Who knows?
Who
I
knows?
mean, I'm not. It is what it is. It's worked out the way it has. And look, I'm not. At the end of the day, like I said, I'm not excusing any action. I mean, we don't. At the end of the day, we really don't know exactly what happened in anything. So, like, I'm not going to sit here and judge that. What I can do is sit there and say it's one human being having empathy for another one. If the circumstances surrounding his exit that I just spoke about were is more the truth than what we've heard previously, then I can cut him a little slack. Like I said, it doesn't mean I agree with how he handled himself. That's not an excuse for that, but I think it
Mhm.
gives cause or it gives reason for his actions. And certainly when you consider a guy that, again, I don't, he just isn't completely and together mentally, and that's
Mhm.
concerning. It should be concerning for the folks around him, and hopefully he won't be around a bunch of enablers. So
That's the biggest thing, the enablers, because again, with his talent and his production, he's always been able to find work, right?
Mhm.
You go from Pittsburgh, they trade him to the Raiders let him go, the Patriots get him, then he ends up in Tampa, and there's 31 other teams, although probably 27, because I think the Raiders, Patriots, Steelers will probably be out of the discussion. Like, I'm just waiting for the Rams to sign him, since they signed everyone else. Like I could just. That would be quite the locker room, wouldn't it? With him, Odell Beckham
oh,
Jr., and Jalen Ramsey.
that would blow
He
up.
and Jalen
Well,
Ramsey would have like punches, punch each other
Matt
before every game.
Matt Stafford's not good enough though, and I'm not saying that
No,
he's
no,
not,
no.
he's he's not good enough to handle that locker room. Like,
He threw
again,
his fourth pick six of the year yesterday.
I mean, he's like, again. There was a point where I was starting to have to waver. I'm like, maybe he is performing, but I said like a month or so ago, I'm still waiting to see the Matt Stafford that isn't from the line. You know what I mean? I'm still waiting for that.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that. And look, I mean, I think Matt Stafford is who he is. Like, I think far too many, and this is another discussion we had. Far too many people were just easily, the Lions brought him down. Well, did they? Did they, or did they just, put a bubble around him for criticism? Because, like, at the end of the day, you could be like, oh, well, it's the Lions. Well, no. We talked about it. The talent around him has been superb. It is again, once again this year, and yeah, he's still doing the same thing. So it'll be interesting.
He had
see.
Calvin Johnson for 8 years. My Lord,
a Hall of
I mean,
Famer after playing. Like, again, that's we're not just talking about great talent. Maybe he made a Pro Bowl here and there. Great talent. We're talking about like all-time legendary Hall of Fame talent. At wide receiver for the bulk of his, certainly the young.
We're talking about a guy who may have the best package of any wide receiver in the history of the sport. That Jerry Rice is the greatest wide receiver. I don't even know who's second. But in terms of physical ability, 6'5", 240 with 4.4 speed, great hands, leaping ability. Right? I mean, like, if you went into the lab and decided to create the perfect wide receiver, it'd be Calvin Johnson. And he had him for 8 years. Not to mention Golden Tate and Marvin Jones Jr. and Galladay later in his career. And look, he had plenty of weapons there, to do what he could. But he always throws the pick at the worst possible time. 4 pick sixes this year. That's insane. I mean, Rodgers only has 3 in his entire career.
Well, it's like it's why I laugh, because it's like, I another tweet that I had like right when they signed Odell Beckham Jr. Some media account tweeted out, "Who's going to stop this?" And my quote tweet response was a Matt Stafford back-breaking interception in the fourth
Oh
quarter.
yeah,
And again, it's you know it's coming. You know it's coming. It's
Oh,
just
yeah.
like it's kind of like Philip Rivers. It's kind of like Philip
Very
Rivers,
similar.
where
Yep.
it's like you know he can put up the numbers, you know he can have a great day, but if he's driving, if they need a score late, you're watching with one eye because you know that pick is just looming. And I feel it's the same way with Matt Stafford. So,
Carson Wentz too now is getting that reputation, right? Like
oh
you know,
yeah. Well,
well, yesterday wasn't necessarily a pick six, but it was a wide open guy that if he hits him, they put the game out of
Well,
reach.
he's been always erratic though, and I think he has times where he settles down and you know, again, I think coaching has to get I mean, it takes a lot to get the most out of him, and I think that's where you know you tip your hat to Frank Reich. But you know, you can't sustain that a whole season. Eventually, there's going to be mistakes that get made, and those mistakes generally are backbreaking, especially for a team that now you look at it. The Colts are, you know, would they fall to 9-7?
9-7.
Yeah, 9-7.
They beat Jacksonville. They're in. So I would.
Yeah, I mean
assume
they should make you know, but again, you know, you're talking about a team that at one point looked like, oh, you don't want to play the Colts, but then you're like, well, guess what? If you're the Patriots, you might not mind a second shot at the Colts because you know maybe this time around, you know, you're not going to just let Jonathan Taylor, you know, do what he does. Yeah, and look, let's not
keep it close. Carson Wentz screw up.
Let's not forget that despite how poorly they did play for large chunks of that game against Indianapolis, they were one stop on third down away from having an opportunity to drive and win that game. So obviously Jonathan Taylor busted open that 60 some odd yard touchdown run, and that was that. But you know, to me, I'm like, if you're the Patriots, well, if you bring your A game or your pretty damn good game, there's going to be a lot of opportunity there for Carson.
Yeah,
Wentz
you can beat them.
over. Yeah,
sure.
So I mean, you know, at the end of the day, and by the way, I can't believe we haven't mentioned that the Patriots are back in the playoffs. That's awesome. We're going to talk about that more, I'm sure, throughout the week and everything else we kind of touched on. But we are going to say goodbye for today, and we're going to wrap up week 17. It's still throwing me off. I'm like 17 plus what? I just don't get it anymore.
17 is this week. Hey, by the way, before you wrap up, Pittsburgh hosting Cleveland tonight. Cleveland's out of the playoff picture. Pittsburgh needs to win both games and have like a minor miracle to get in, but it's probably going to be Ben Roethlisberger's last home game as a Steeler. He's going to retire at the end of the year. The Manning cast tonight in the fourth quarter. Aaron Rodgers is going to be on. Now they've clinched the number 1 seed. They're off tomorrow. He'll probably be 3 scotches in. Lord knows what's going to come out of his mouth in the fourth quarter. That's going to be awesome.
It should be entertaining. And once again, I look for some good material for tomorrow morning. You know, so use it. So, all right, that's it for us. Give us a follow on Twitter at FPC Radio Live, and check us out tomorrow morning when we hop back on here, roughly around 9 a.m. So have a great day, folks, and we'll